Hey, seventh grade. So our learning target for today is I can solve equations with fractions. You should be on page 31. So everybody should be on page 31 for our learning target today. So we're going to talk about some definitions. The first thing we're going to talk about is the word reciprocal. You should have heard that word back in elementary school when you were dealing with fractions. You would talk about multiplication by the reciprocal. A reciprocal really is when two numbers whose product is 1. So product meaning multiplication is 1. Product means to multiply. So when we're saying 1 over x is the reciprocal of x over 1, because when we multiply 1 over x times x over 1, it is equal to 1. I'll show you an example. So if we take the fraction 1/5, we flip it, called the reciprocal, and multiply by 5 over 1, we end up getting 1 times 5 is 5. 5 times 1 is 5. We end up getting that product of 1. So that's where that definition of reciprocal comes from. So we're going to talk about 3 different options of how to solve equations with fractions. So our first option is called the reciprocal method. So we're going to take this fraction 2/3, x equals 5. Actually, let's go ahead and write that equation 3 times here. 2/3 x equals 5. All right, so 3 times we're going to write that fraction because we're going to solve that same problem 3 different ways. Then after we're done doing reciprocal method, diffraction method, decimal method, then you'll go ahead and pick your favorite option. Starting with reciprocal method. For reciprocal method, what we actually do is we multiply by the reciprocal of this fraction. So we're going to go ahead and take this fraction and flip it. Multiply by 3 over 2, copy, paste. All right, crew, so this is what we end up getting then. We end up getting 6 over 6, which is equal to 1. 6 over 6 is 1x. That's what happens every time you take the reciprocal. And on the right-hand side, we end up getting 15 over 2. So we get 1x equals 15 over 2. And we can go ahead and leave that as our answer. X equals 15 over 2. Other possible answers would be, we could call that 7 1/2. Or we could call that 7.5. So that would be the mixed number version, decimal version, and improper fraction version. All 3 are correct answers using what's called the reciprocal method. So we multiply by the fraction's reciprocal, 3 over 2, copy, paste. So we took the original fraction, 2/3. We multiply by the reciprocal, 3 over 2, copy, paste, and we ended up getting one of these 3 answers is perfect for today's work. All right, so the next next option is something called the diffraction method. The diffraction method, basically we want to get rid of the fraction. I think most of you will prefer this method. So this is the hand method. We're going to take our hand, cover the variable. We're going to first get rid of the division by 3. We're going to first get rid of the denominator or the fraction. So we're going to multiply by 3 to get rid of this divide by 3. Copy, paste. So our first step is to just get rid of denominator. So we end up getting 2x equals, on the right-hand side, we have 15. 2x equals 15. Go ahead and copy that step. Multiply by 3, copy, paste. Just getting rid of the denominator. And now we're right back to hand method. Our job is to get rid of that multiplication by 2. So we divide by 2, copy, paste. So we end up with x equals 15 over 2. Same answers as before. 15 over 2, 7 1/2 would work, or 7.5 would work. All of those answers are fabulous answers. That's called diffraction. If I'm going too fast right now, you should pause that video. Okay, moving on to the last method. The last method is called decimal method. The tricky part about the decimal method is that we will have to round a lot of our answers. We have 2/3 x equals 5. What we'll do is we'll take this fraction 2/3, throw it in our calculator. 2 divide 3. Go ahead and type that in. 2 divided by 3. We're going to turn that into a decimal. This is called the decimal method. We'll round to the nearest hundredth, so that becomes 0.6. And it's 0.6666666, repeating to infinity. We're going to round it to the hundredths place, so it's 0.67. If we haven't used it, drag it down. There's a variable x. We have a 5 on the right-hand side. So the hand method kicks in. The operation here is multiplication. Our job is to get rid of the 0.67. So we're going to go ahead and divide right here. Divide by that decimal, 0.67. Just like we do in hand method. Copy, paste. So we end up with a 1x on the right, and then we have 5 divided by 0.67 on the right-hand side. So we have 5 divide by 0.67. When we do that, we end up with 7.46 as our answer. Because we're rounding it or cutting it off, we'll turn it to approximately equal to that. We don't have to divide by 1, so we have x is approximately equal to 7.46. So that's what we call the decimal method. So those are the three methods. You notice that all of our answers are very close. Reciprocal and diffraction had the exact same answer options. The decimal method was a little bit different because we had to do some rounding, but they're all very close. You pick your favorite method. I will show you another example, 3 different ways, so you can make another decision on which method you like the best. So we're going to take this problem right here and we're going to rewrite it 3 times. So we have 2/3 x plus 8 equals 5. 2/3 x plus 8 equals 5. 2/3 x plus 8 equals 5. Go ahead and write that 3 times. Everybody free writing. Go ahead. Okay, crew, here we go. Reciprocal method means we're going to end up getting rid of the fraction with the reciprocal. But before we do that, let's go ahead and work through our hand method. Hand method says cover the variable and anything attached. I'm going to subtract 8, copy, paste. Step 1. Everybody should be doing step 1. Subtract 8, copy, paste. I then have, if I haven't used it, drag it down. And on the right hand side, we have 5. Subtract 8. You can go ahead and use your calculator there. 5 subtract 8. I'm going to go ahead and stop, chop, chop. 5 plus -8 is -3. Go ahead and write 2/3 x equals -3. For reciprocal method, that means we're going to actually take the reciprocal of the fraction that exists. The fraction that exists is 2/3. Operation here is multiplication. For the reciprocal method, we take that and we flip it. Copy, paste. All right, so then what I have here on the left-hand side is I have 6/6. 6/6 is 1. 6 divided by 6 is 1. X. On the right-hand side, I have 2 fractions. If I throw a 1 under that first fraction, that gives me -9 in the numerator, 2 in the denominator. So I have 1x equals -9/2. You could also write that as a mixed number, x equals -4 1/2. Or you could say x is equal to -4.5. I'll take all of these answers. I'm not picky about which form. Improper fraction is fine, a mixed number is fine, and or a decimal version is fine. So that is what we call the reciprocal method in all 3 forms. Okay, so diffraction, I believe that I think you will think that is your favorite method when dealing with fractions, but you go ahead and pick whichever one you feel most comfortable with. Again, if you need to pause the video, this would be a great time to pause the video, catch up on anything that we've done. I'm going to go ahead and erase this just so I have some space. I'm going to go back and erase this. You might have to rewind and watch it again if you need that work that's there. Hand method, I cover the variable and anything attached. I'm going to subtract 8, copy, paste. Now you could diffraction right from the first step, but I always like to do this first step and get rid of those integers first. So if I haven't used it, drag it down. On the right-hand side, I have 5, subtract 8. Again, you can use your calculator on that. You could stop, chop, chop. That gives you -3. This is my favorite method when dealing with fractions. Diffraction means to get rid of the fraction or the denominator. So we're going to go ahead and multiply by 3 because we're trying to get rid of divide by 3 first. Not worried about the 2 right now. I'm just going to get rid of divide by 3 first. Copy, paste. All right, crew, here we go. This is called diffraction, get rid of the denominator. So we end up with 2x. And on the right-hand side, we have a triangle problem, -3 times +3. So we have triangle problem here. Negative on the 3, positive on the 3 gives me a -9. Hand method kicks in right here. Divide by 2, copy, paste. So we get 1x equals -9/2. Again, if you prefer to go mixed number on that, that's fine with me. X equals -4 1/2. That's totally fine as well. And or x equals -4.5. All are super good answers. You could have improper, mixed, and or decimal. They're all equivalent. You can plug any of those in for x and make sure that it works out. Okay, guys, hang in there. So our last example, same problem. We should get something very close to these answers of -9/2, -4 1/2, which is the same as -4.5. All these are equivalent. Over here in the decimal method. So decimal method is the hand method as well. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract 8, copy, paste. All right. Same first step in all 3 problems. If I haven't used it, I drag it down. We had 2/3 x. Equals, on the right-hand side, we have 5. Subtract 8. You can go ahead and use your calculator on that. Or you can stop, chop, chop. 5 plus -8 gives me -3. So we have this fraction 2/3 x equals -3. That's kind of what's left in this problem. My job then, I'm going to go ahead and highlight that fraction, is to change this fraction into a decimal because we're doing decimal method. This is the same problem 3 different ways. You get to pick which way you like best. So when I round this, or I divide that, 2 divided by 3 becomes 0.66666 repeating. If I were to round to the hundredths, that's 67 cents. Variable x is attached. Hand method kicks in right here. My job is to get the x alone. This is multiplication, so I'm going to divide by 0.67, copy, paste. Go ahead and catch up there. Divide by 0.67, copy, paste. Okay, crew, if I haven't used it, I drag it down. So there's a variable x that has not been touched yet. On the right-hand side, we have -3. There was a negative here. Sorry, I kind of lost the sign there. We have a -3. Divide by 0.67. When we do that division, we end up with -4.4, and I'm going to go ahead and cut that off, 8. And because of rounding, because I just rounded that, I cut it off, I'm going to squiggly line it using approximately equal. Now, if you don't quite have the hang of that, that's okay. It's more 8th grade. My answer is x is approximately equal to -4.48. Now, it's not a perfect system. It's very close to the answer of -4.5, but because of rounding that, we have to use that approximation. So your job for tonight is to pick which method you prefer. Now, you just saw the problem 3 different ways here. You saw it reciprocal method, diffraction method, decimal method. Any of those ways are great. Most of my students will choose the middle one called diffraction. Get rid of the denominator first and then get rid of the multiplication. So just some things that we should think about. First of all, you should stop, chop, chop if necessary. Okay, stop, chop, chop if necessary. Hand method kicks in. You have 3 choices. You can go reciprocal if you want, you can go diffraction if you want, or you can go decimal. Go ahead and write those down. So you have 3 choices. I don't care which method. You pick the method. If you need to watch the video again, go ahead and watch the video again. And finally, you need to check. Of course, you need to check. Be careful if you use decimal method because of rounding. The rounding is tricky with decimal method. You will not get an exact answer. The rounding makes it tricky when you plug back in. You will not have perfection there. Okay? So, for tonight's homework, your job is to do all of page 32 due tomorrow. If you need to rewind any of that, if you're confused about any of the methods, make sure you go back and watch it. You do not have to solve all 3 methods for each problem. You pick which method you like best. You have 3 choices: reciprocal, diffraction, and decimal. Again, your homework for tonight is to do page 32. Have a fabulous night. 7:30.